All right, so welcome or welcome back, whatever the case may be. I want to try and do a marginally quick video on two things. The first is build plates, and the second is methods of gluing together model parts. I've got another video coming that I just did a 5-foot tall Baymax. It was kind of a Christmas present, and I learned a couple of things throughout both the printing process and the assembly process that I thought I would share. And so let's get started. What I have in front of me here are 4 different build plates. On my left, this is the Cryogrip Frostbite plate, followed by the Biqu cold plate from Amazon. I don't believe you can get this one from Amazon just yet, but this is a Biqu Cryogrip, but it's not the Frostbite. I think it's an earlier model than the Frostbite. This is the Frostbite. Here is the Bambu Lab Cool Plate Super Tack, and here is the Darkmoon 3D Ice Plate. So I have got a lot of build plates, a lot, on the order of probably 20. I've tried pretty much everything that's come out, including the Wham Bam and a bunch of others. And I've kind of landed, if you will, on the BQ plates. And I say that because I spent a little over 980 hours printing Baymax, and during that time frame, I found that between the Frostbite, the Cryogrip BQ plate, and the Darkmoon, that I was able to get prints where I had literally no lifting on the edges. Didn't need to use brims, didn't have to worry about it. Now, Cryogrip is meant to be a cool plate. The Frostbite's meant to be cool plate settings. This one is meant to be actually textured plate heated settings. This is meant to be cool plate settings, and this is meant to be textured. So if you look, there's a couple of things to point out. I was also doing some testing on the size of the prints. Now, I'll get to this one in a second. The Cryogrip Frostbite, this thing has stuck really, really well, incredibly well. And in fact, you have to really bend the thing to get those prints to lift off. And once that's done, I mean, the bottom texture is perfect. You really can't, other than the actual texture itself, and only in certain light can you see the outer walls versus the bottom layer infill. This was printed at 6 walls and 5%, which is how I did all of Baymax. And the reason I'm doing this as a test is I actually want to weigh these and get a sense for how I can reduce the weight of some prints going forward. This is the BQ Cryogrip as found on Amazon. This one's actually also 6 walls, but it's 2%. Kind of the same behavior. You really have to fight to get stuff off of here, which again, I really, really like. One thing I did notice between 6 walls and 5% and 6 walls and 2% is the top surface there's quite a bit of difference there. I suspect that's because it's bridging across that 5% infill, and here it's bridging across that 2% infill. So there's some, they don't really feel like they're depressed at all, but you can definitely see the difference. So 6 walls, 5%, 6 walls, 2%. Again, I did Baymax at 6 and 5%. And then I'm going to skip the Super Tack for the moment and go to the Darkmoon 3D Ice Plate. Actually, I printed this one in cold as well. Same thing. You've really got to push to get these off of here. And I will tell you that these prime lines are extremely hard to get. Don't use your nail. You'll wind up embedding one under your fingernail. But I really like that Darkmoon 3D Ice Plate. This one was printed 10 walls, sides, top, and bottom, and then 2%. And again, it's still got some of that, not as much, I think because more walls, but it's 2%, and it definitely feels heavier. I'll do weight comparisons in a minute. Last but not least, the Bambu Cool Plate Super Tack. I am not impressed with this plate. I had high hopes for it. This is the same filament. It's Sunloop PLA Plus in black and gray. And this is how pretty much every non-Bambu filament behaves on this plate. If you look at the slicer settings for plate, it's really just temperatures that dictate how it behaves. But for some reason, I could never get first layers that looked like they weren't under extruded. And of course, you know, catastrophic failures like this one, I couldn't get anything to print properly unless it was Bambu filament. Now, in fairness, I tried Bambu, Elegoo, Overture, and Sunlu, and the Bambu is the only one that stuck. You may have varied results, but I only have one of these Bambu Cool Plate Super Tacks, and I won't be adding another. The other thing I didn't like about this is if you look at the bottom of the plate, it's very, very hard to read the code, that QR code. Every time I printed with this plate, I got an error that it could not find the plate indicator and that I had to override basically to get it to finish printing. So that's the Bambu Cool Plate Super Tack. Not a fan. I won't be using that one going forward unless I run out of other plates. So now, all that being said, again, if I had to compare price-wise, these are all about the same price. In terms of ease of use, all about the same. I set these at cold. I set this at the standard textured plate temperature. I will tell you, however, that lead time for the Frostbite and the Glaciers and lead time for the Darkmoons are definitely longer than the lead time for the Biqu Cryogrip, strictly because it's on Amazon. I can get these things in about 2 days. It took them about 5 days to get me this, and it took me, the better part of, I think, 2 months to get this one. So, point of personal preference, I love the Biqu. I would probably stick with either the Biqu Cryogrip from Amazon or the Darkmoon ICE. If it's got to be a cold plate with textured and that same holding power, I'd go with the Darkmoon ICE. If it's got to be, or if it can just be a standard heated bed, I would go with the Biqu Cryogrip from Amazon. And of course, if you want to wait, the Frostbite and the Glacier from Biqu directly. Notice though that all these plates are for PLA and PETG. We're not talking at all about ABS or ASA or any other filament types. Okay, so all that out of the way. Okay, now that those are out of the way, I'd like to talk about adhesion. A couple of different tests that I want to do, and I'm going to let you follow along at home, is I'm going to basically do 4 different types of adhesion tests. They are 3D Gloop for PLA. This is the Grip, previously Weld-On 16, which I used basically almost exclusively for Baymax. E6000, which I've had various results with. And last but not least, allegedly, and I've never done this, so we're going to try it together, this is actually ABS slurry. So this is Bambu ABS GF white and gray mixed with acetone. And so we're going to use this as well. So what I did is basically I made 8 blocks, and I'm going to do 4 tests by gluing 2 blocks together. And I'm going to cheat. I'm going to use the bottom face of the block because I know they were stuck to the printed bed. And we'll see how that turns out. So first and foremost, since I'm going to be doing some weight tests on these, I want to transfer my numbers. Should have done this off camera. That way I can weigh these. All right, we're going to go ahead and weigh these. Okay, so let's get to gluing. And what I'm going to do, some very non-scientific tests. I'm going to glue these things together. And then once I've let them sit for 24 hours, I will see what kind of stress I can put them under before they will break. So I'm going to start with the 3D Gloop. And I'm basically going to apply it to both of these surfaces. I'm going to stick it together and then I'm going to clamp it. So we'll start with the clamp and get that ready. 3D Goop's pretty cool. It comes in this jar and it's supported like so. So it doesn't rattle around in there. It's got those nice little depressions top and bottom to hold the jar. Jar instructions say to shake it and then let it sit for 2 minutes. So we're going to do that. While I'm waiting on that, I'm going to go ahead and open the E6000 so we can do our E6000 test. And I'm going to go ahead and shake up the ABS slurry. And last but not least, I'm going to put on some gloves. I have eye protection on already in the form of my glasses. But I am going to put the gloves on. Since it can't really be shown on camera, I will tell you that the odor from the Gloop is considerable. It's significant. Much more so than the Weld-On 16, the E6000, or the ABS slurry. But that being said, it's kind of subjective. Regardless, do this in a well-ventilated area. All right, we're going to start with the 3D Gloop. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to open the jar, and it comes with a great little brush, and I'm going to brush on Gloop on both parts. And this is basically solvent welding. So once I put these together, I really don't want to move them around again. And as I said, I'm going to clamp them. And I'm going to set that right there. That is the 3D Gloop. Next, we'll go with the Weld-On 16. There's my bottom. For the Weld-On, I'm going to go ahead and use some of these little acid-free brushes from Amazon. I'll put the link down below. And the way that I do this is I go ahead and I spread the Weld-On on there, and then I wipe it with the brush. So we're going to do that. And again, this is primarily the method that I used for Baymax, is the Weld-On. I did use some 3D Gloop initially because I wanted to test that. But when it comes down to it, the bulk of what I did with Baymax was the Weld-On 16. So it wants to slide around right now. The Gloop didn't because that's a solvent weld. The Gloop didn't want to slide around. The Weld-On 16 wants to slide around a bit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and set it this way. And I'm going to wipe off the glue that's squeezed out around the edges. So that's the Weld-On 16. A little harder to work with. The Gloop, I didn't have any issues with the sliding around. Now, when I did Baymax, it had dowels, so I didn't really have to worry about the sliding around there either. But let's move on. So I'm going to use another acid-free brush, and this time I'm going to glue with E6000. Same process applies. I'm going to go ahead and puncture the E6000 tube, and then I'm going to apply it. This time I'm only going to apply to one side. Why? Because this stuff is pretty viscous. And the E6000 stinks. I'm not a fan of the E6000. I'm told that it works better on PETG than it does PLA, and of course this is PLA. But wanted to make sure we tested it. So we'll see how much this one slides around, if I can get a clamp on it without it running away. There we go. That is E6000. All right, this is already starting to set up, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to put a clamp on it now. This is my Weld-On 16. Notice the deflection there at the top with this clamp. This is the 2% infill, and it's squishing down pretty good. But again, this is just adhesion tests. Last but not least, ABS slurry. And I don't have a brush for that, so we're going to use my handy dandy acid-free brushes. I've already shaken this up earlier. It's kind of stinky. Oh, I put way too much on there. Okay, well, my mistake. I'll clean that up in just a moment. I'm going to put it together first. Yeah, that was a fail. Don't worry. I'm doing this so you can learn from my mistakes. I poured way too much out. I'm going to go ahead and set this down and see if I can clean this up a bit. Wow, that was a spectacular fail. You got to see it here live. All right. Again, this is ABS slurry on PLA parts. I'm going to go ahead and put a clamp on this and then try to clean it up some more. And kind of like the Weld-On 16, this is very slippery. It doesn't want to stay together. I'm going to leave the clamp off for a little bit, and maybe this will set up. I'm going to put my lid back on my jar so it doesn't evaporate. And I'm going to move this kind of into a standing position. So note to self, ABS slurry, very runny. I should have added a little bit more ABS to it, but this is for science, so we'll leave that like that. And that is the ABS slurry, which is very ugly, but we shall see. Okay, we'll stop there and come back in 24 hours. Okie doke, and we're back. So this is incredibly unscientific, so as a result, instead of waiting 24 hours, I decided to wait 48 hours. to do my tests, and I've basically just got 4 tests that I'm going to do. The first test is I'm going to try and separate the cubes by hand to see if I can break that glue joint. The second is I'm going to very scientifically smack it on the edge of the bench here to see if it causes it to fail on the glue joint. The third is I'm going to drop it on the concrete floor from about a height of 4 feet. And last but not least, I'm actually going to use these F-style bar clamps. I'm going to grab it and I'm going to try and break the 2 pieces apart that way. So let's get started. We'll start with the 3D Gloop joint. Again, this stuff is more of a solvent weld than it is a glue joint. It's very similar to the acetone with ABS. So here is 3D Gloop. I'm going to try and break this apart by hand. Again, I can't tell you how much force I'm applying, but I'm applying quite a bit. That didn't do anything, so I'm going to try smacking it on the edge. That was a pretty rough smack and still nothing. Thirdly, I'm going to drop it on the concrete. It's acting like one solid piece. And last but not least, I'll see if I can separate these 2 pieces just by applying force with the bar clamps and breaking it. We'll see if it breaks on the seam. So here we go. All right, so what that basically did, it didn't separate at the seam. It caused some cracking of the internal infill. I could hear it. You could probably hear it on the camera as well. So that's 3D Gloop. I'm pretty happy with that. The only downside to the Gloop is, well, there's 2. Number one is the odor, but you know, we're PPE. Really, is just the cost of the stuff. It is not cheap. I'll put some information down below about where to get it and how much it costs. I got mine from Matter Hackers. All right. Next is the Weld-On 16. I got this from Amazon. And I'm going to go ahead and try the same test. So just by hand, trying to separate the 2. You can hear me talking with my teeth gritted. Didn't really help. Secondly is the smack test. No change. Concrete. Really, really good weld there. And last but not least, I'll try the F-clamps. See if I can break these 2 pieces apart that way. Yeah, I really can't. So just like the Gloop, that guy held up pretty well. Again, there's some discoloration or marring on the sides, and I could feel it compressing because of the infill. I may redo this with some smaller blocks that are solid just to get a better sense. But really happy with the Weld-On 16, and that's what I use for Baymax primarily. I did use some Gloop on Baymax as well, but I ran low, so I switched to the Weld-On 16. I'm glad that I did. Next is the E6000. I actually got this at Hobby Lobby. Of course, you can get it most everywhere. The thing I don't like about the E6000 is it's super viscous. So when you put the parts together, they tend to stand off more than they do with the Gloop or the Weld-On. It's just a thicker material. So I don't use E6000 very often just for that reason, and it makes it very slippery. But let's try this as well. So trying to separate it by hand. I don't think any of these are going to separate by hand. I don't have that kind of grip strength. Second is the smack test. No difference. Concrete. And you know, I'll be honest with you, I fully expected the drop on concrete test to cause some of these to fail. Again, these are incredibly unscientific tests, but for me, I feel like, nope, now, there we go. So I did actually get the glue up with E6000 to separate. My R2D2, I used with my PET G dome, I used E6000. And I did, in fact, and the reason I do the drop test is I had R2D2's dome come apart when I dropped him, and it was with E6000. The E6000 here is still a little tacky, even though it's been over 48 hours. I, again, personally am not super happy with E6000 just in general. So take that for what you will. And last but not least, I read online that, and I've never tried this before with PLA. I have used the ABS slurry with ABS, but I read online that you can, and this is ugly, and that's my fault, obviously, that you can use ABS slurry to glue PLA. So I'm really, really curious to see how this works. So trying to separate it by hand, nothing. Smack test. Actually, that's really good. Concrete test. Color me surprised. And last but not least, we'll try the F clamps. And here we go. Well, I heard some cracking and it gave way, but it didn't give way at the seam. The side of the plastic cracked here a little bit, but the seam is nice and tight. So had this not been as ugly as I made it, I'm really kind of happy with that. So final result, Gloop, as I expected, great. Again, this is totally unscientific, but I've had a couple of times where I've dropped things and they've kind of broken apart at the seams that I thought were really tight, well-glued seams. So that's the reason for my test. Really happy with the Gloop, really happy with the Weld-On 16. My personal preference is the Weld-On 16 only because of the cost. You can get, I think it's 4, I'm going to put the information down below, but I think it's 4 tubes of this for about $45, where I think you're paying the same amount of money just for this jar. And there's a lot more, obviously, adhesive to be had out of 4 tubes than there is out of this one jar. Again, this is solvent welding. This is an adhesive. So, you know, take it for what it's worth. And last but not least, the ABS slurry. I'm really impressed by this. I'm really surprised by this. I'm really happy. And the reason for that is acetone is super inexpensive. And I've always got ABS supports. That's actually how I made this slurry. It could be a bit thicker, but basically any of the supports I pull off any of my ABS prints for R2D2, I've just been dropping that stuff into acetone and watching it disappear like into quicksand. And then I have this jar that I try to keep you know, closed so we don't get any more evaporation. But I am very impressed with that. I'm going to do some more tests actually with the ABS slurry, probably with a thicker composition and doing a better job of putting it on there without making this thing look like an utter disaster. It's a train wreck, but it held up. I'm super happy. So with that, E6000, in my opinion, again, very unscientific. I'm sure people will have comments, but I'm not real happy with the E6000. Gloop, Weld-On, and ABS slurry, good stuff. So thanks for watching, and see you again with some Baymax, some R2D2, and some other resin stuff coming up soon.